The family Christmas party was supposed to be a night of warmth and laughter, but sometimes the smallest mistake can shatter everything. It all started with a coffee mug. I reached for one on the kitchen island, the same red ceramic as a dozen others. My reading glasses were in my coat pocket, and without them, every mug looked identical. I didn't even take a sip before my daughter-in-law, Melissa, snapped at me like I'd committed a crime. "Thomas." Her voice cut through the chatter like a blade. She stormed over, snatched the mug from my hand, and stared at me with disgust. "Don't ever put your filthy hands on my things again." The room went silent. The football game on TV sounded deafening. I looked down at my hands, swollen knuckles, a few age spots. Perfectly clean. I'd washed them the moment I arrived. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. The mugs looked alike. She grabbed a paper towel, then another. She wiped the handle, the rim, the outside, like I'd left poison on it. Every eye in the room was on me. Then my son, Ryan, walked over. For one hopeful second, I thought he'd tell her she'd overreacted. Instead, he locked eyes with me and said, "Dad, just apologize properly." "I already did." Melissa crossed her arms. "That wasn't an apology." "It was."
"No," she snapped.
"You always act like none of this matters." Ryan's face tightened. His business partners were watching. Neighbors. Family. Everyone. "Just say you're sorry and mean it," he said. I said I was sorry. His voice rose. "Either apologize to Melissa properly," he paused, "or get out." Nobody moved. Not even the children. I waited for him to realize what he'd said. For him to take it back. But he just stared at me, waiting. I looked around the room. No one met my eyes. So I picked up my coat. Sophie tugged at my sleeve. "Grandpa, aren't you staying for dessert?" Before I could answer, Ryan smiled at her. "Everything's fine." It wasn't. I pulled on my gloves slowly. "Merry Christmas, buddy," I told Evan. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." Then I walked out the front door. Snowflakes hit my face before I reached the truck. The drive back to Worthington felt longer than 30 minutes. Arthritis made my fingers ache around the steering wheel. I turned the heater up higher. Halfway home, I remembered the framed photograph. It was still inside Ryan's unopened present under their tree. Somehow, that hurt more than being thrown out. I pulled into a Kroger parking lot because my vision had gone blurry. Not from age, from tears. I sat there watching shoppers carry last-minute groceries through the snow, and I thought about everything. Teaching Ryan to drive, helping him pay for Ohio State, co-signing the mortgage on his first house, spending weekends showing him how to estimate flooring jobs. 40 years building something, so he'd never have to start from nothing. I wasn't crying because Melissa embarrassed me. I was crying because my own son had looked at me like I was the embarrassing old man everyone wished would quietly disappear. When I finally reached home, the house felt painfully quiet. I hung up my coat, made another cup of coffee, and noticed the blinking light on my answering machine. One voicemail. Marjorie, my accountant for nearly 30 years. "Tom," she said, "Ryan still hasn't signed the year-end property documents." She paused. "And he keeps talking like those buildings belong to him." Another pause. "I think you two need to clear that up before somebody makes a very expensive mistake." The message ended. I played it again, then a third time. Sitting alone in my dark kitchen, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit for years. Maybe protecting my son hadn't made his life easier. Maybe it had simply taught him that everything I owned and everything I was would always be there, no matter how he treated me. Christmas morning used to begin with the smell of Elaine's coffee. She had a habit of waking before sunrise, turning on soft Christmas music and pretending she wasn't the one shaking presents under the tree, trying to guess what I'd bought her. After Ryan was born, she added cinnamon rolls to the routine. When he was little, he'd come running down the hallway in his pajamas before either of us had finished our first cup. Those mornings disappeared one by one. First Elaine, then the noise. Then somewhere along the way, the feeling that I still belonged in my son's holiday traditions. This Christmas morning, my house was silent except for the furnace kicking on every few minutes. I made myself scrambled eggs, took 2 bites, and put the plate in the refrigerator. At 8:30, my phone buzzed. A text. A picture of Evan holding the train set I'd given him.
Thanks, Grandpa.
It's awesome. Love you. A minute later, another arrived. Sophie, wearing the little accessory set. I stared at the screen for a long time. The kids still loved me. But sitting there alone, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe I should have fought harder. Or maybe I should have walked out long ago. Merry Christmas. Both messages had obviously come from Ryan's phone. There wasn't a single word from him. I stared at the screen for a long time before setting it face down on the kitchen table. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Most families were opening gifts. I opened a filing cabinet. If I couldn't have company, I could at least organize paperwork I'd been putting off. Old habits die hard. The dining room table disappeared beneath folders within half an hour. Tax statements, insurance renewals, property maintenance invoices, leases, inspection reports, the kind of paperwork nobody enjoys until something goes wrong. As I sorted everything into neat piles, memories came with every folder. I started Bennett Commercial Flooring when I was 29. Back then, headquarters was an old 40-foot Econoline van that leaked whenever it rained. I bought used flooring tools from a contractor who was retiring. My first jobs were church basements, little diners, barbershops, and dental offices around Columbus. I'd spend all day installing vinyl flooring, then come home and help Elaine calculate invoices at our kitchen table after dinner. Some nights, we'd fall asleep with calculators still sitting between us. She never complained. Not once. When Ryan got older, he loved hanging around the warehouse. He'd sweep floors for spending money, ride the forklift before I told him not to, ask 1,000 questions about every project. By high school, he could estimate square footage faster than some grown men. When he graduated from Ohio State, he came to work with me. I was proud of that. Still am. 7 years earlier, after Elaine's cancer diagnosis, everything changed. I couldn't keep working 70-hour weeks while driving her to treatments. Ryan stepped up. He handled crews, customers, scheduling, bids. I started preparing him to take over. Eventually, I transferred the operating company to him. Everything he'd need to run the business. The Bennett Commercial Flooring name, the trucks, equipment, inventory, customer contracts, vendor relationships, operating accounts, the employees, everything. Well, almost everything. One folder stopped me. Its tab read, Bennett Property Holdings. Separate company. Separate ownership. Always had been. The warehouse, the office building, the fenced storage yard, the smaller building leased to an electrical contractor next door. Those properties had never been transferred. Elaine insisted on that. I remember the conversation like it happened yesterday. She was sitting in her favorite recliner, wrapped in a blanket despite the middle of July. Tom, I'm listening. Promise me something. I looked up from a stack of invoices. What? If Ryan takes over the business, don't hand him absolutely everything. I frowned. Why not? Because he's capable. I know. And capable people sometimes learn the wrong lesson when life becomes too easy. I argued with her. He'd never take advantage. I don't think he would intentionally. She smiled sadly. But if someone never has to ask what something costs, eventually they forget somebody paid for it. At the time, I thought the medication was making her philosophical. Now, I wasn't so sure. I opened another folder. The family occupancy agreement. Simple. Straightforward. Ryan's company could use the warehouse and office for a symbolic annual payment. In return, his company covered utilities and everyday maintenance. I continued paying property taxes, insurance, roof repairs, structural maintenance, anything major. Either side could end the arrangement with 90 days written notice. And one sentence buried near the end caught my eye again. The property may not be used as collateral or financing security without written permission from the owner. Ryan had signed it. I found his signature on the last page. Blue ink. 7 years old. A sticky note fluttered out of the folder. Marjorie's handwriting. Asterisk sent Ryan another copy. No response. Asterisk. I laughed once. Not because it was funny, because it suddenly explained so much. Over the years, Marjorie had occasionally mentioned paperwork Ryan still hadn't reviewed. I'd always answered the same way. I'll remind him. Then I'd forget. Or I'd handle it myself because it was easier. Maybe I'd been making the same mistake for years. My phone rang just after noon. Marjorie. Merry Christmas, Tom. Merry Christmas. You sound tired. I am. She hesitated. Want to grab lunch tomorrow? I suppose. Good. There's something I think you should see. The next morning, we met at a little diner in Clintonville we'd both been visiting since the 80s. The waitress recognized us immediately. Same as always? Marjorie nodded. You know us too well. Coffee arrived before we'd even opened the menus. Marjorie slid a thick envelope across the table. I've been putting this together for a while. Inside was a spreadsheet. Columns.
Dates.
Invoices. Property taxes. Insurance premiums. Roof replacement 3 years earlier. Parking lot resurfacing. Drainage repairs after heavy spring flooding. Security camera upgrades. Heating system replacement. Page after page. I added the numbers in my head, then stopped trying. That's a lot. She finished the sentence.
Yes.
I knew you were covering expenses. I don't think you realize how many. She took a sip of coffee. Ryan probably doesn't either. I looked up. You think he knows? I honestly don't. She shrugged. I think he's repeated the same story for so long that he believes it. What story? That the warehouse is basically already his. She said it carefully, not accusing, just stating what she'd observed. He talks about it in meetings that way. My stomach tightened. Is he lying? I don't believe so. Then what? She sighed. I think he stopped asking questions years ago. That answer somehow hurt more, because it sounded exactly like something I had helped create. Marjorie reached into the envelope again. There's one more thing. She handed me several pages from a financing presentation. Ryan's company was trying to expand into Cincinnati. New crews. New office. Larger contracts. Ambitious. Impressive. One sentence caught my attention immediately. Company-owned warehouse and office facility provides strong asset position. I read it twice. Then a third time. He can't actually believe. He does. Marjorie folded her hands. The bank hasn't approved anything yet, but if they ask for proof, they eventually will. I stared out the diner window. Cars rolled slowly through melting snow. A father carried a little girl across the parking lot because she didn't want to step in slush. I don't want to ruin him, I said quietly. I know. I don't want revenge. I know. The words took longer than I expected. Don't think I can keep pretending everything's fine. Marjorie nodded once. I've been waiting a long time to hear you say that. When we finished lunch, I drove home instead of heading straight to the warehouse. I parked in my driveway, but didn't get out. For 20 minutes, I sat there looking at my phone. I considered calling Ryan, apologizing, even though I still couldn't figure out what I was supposed to apologize for. If saying sorry meant I could see my grandchildren again, maybe it was worth swallowing my pride. Instead, I deleted his number from the call screen. Not from my contacts, just from the recent calls. There was a difference. That evening, I pulled out a legal pad and tried writing him a letter. 3 pages, then 4. Halfway through the 5th page, I realized every sentence sounded angry. I tore the whole thing into pieces. Finally, I picked up my phone and called someone else. David Moreno, my real estate attorney. He answered on the 3rd ring. Tom, sorry to bother you during the holidays. You never bother me. I took a slow breath. I don't want revenge that ruins my son. David stayed quiet. I want an arrangement that no longer requires me to pretend he respects me. There was a pause before he answered. I think that's a very different conversation. So do I. We'll meet on Monday. After we settled on a time, he asked one more question. Tom, are you sure? I looked out the window at the quiet street. The snow had started falling again. No, I said, but I'm going to find out. I closed my eyes. Christmas Eve flashed behind my lids like a movie I couldn't stop watching. Melissa wiping that mug. Ryan pointing toward the front door. Sophie asking why Grandpa was leaving. Yes, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Then my gaze drifted to the empty chair across the room. The one Elaine used to sit in every morning with her coffee. Steam rising. Quiet conversations that never needed to be loud. But I'm not sure, I added slowly, that I'm ready for him to actually believe that's what this is all about. I met David Moreno the Monday after Christmas. His office overlooked High Street in downtown Columbus. The view wasn't much: gray buildings, sluggish traffic, people hunched against the cold, clutching paper coffee cups. David always said good legal advice didn't need a pretty backdrop. He shook my hand firmly. "How are your hands today?" "Still attached." He smiled. "So, average." "About average." He already had my file open before I sat down. The deed, the occupancy agreement, property tax records. Marjorie had emailed everything over the weekend. David leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Before we talk paperwork, answer one question." "Honestly." "I'll try." "Are you here because your son hurt your feelings?" I looked out the window for a long moment.
No.
He waited. "I'm here because I finally realized I've been confusing generosity with responsibility." That earned a slow nod.
Good.
That answer gives us room to think instead of react. For the next hour, we walked through every option. Option 1, leave everything exactly as it is. I shook my head. "I can't." "Why not?" "Because nothing changes." He made a note. Option 2, sell Ryan the property. I'd consider it. If he qualifies for financing on his own. David nodded again, cleared his throat. Reasonable. He flipped another page. Option 3. He slid a draft across the desk. A standard commercial lease. I read quietly. 3-year term. Rent below market value. Clearly divided maintenance responsibilities. 90 days before implementation. An option to purchase later through an independent appraisal. No back rent. No penalties. No surprises. When I finished, I looked up. This is fair. It is. It doesn't punish him.
No.
It simply ends the family discount. David smiled faintly. Exactly. I set the papers on his desk. This is the one. He studied me carefully. You understand he'll see this as punishment. I know. And the rest of the family may agree. I know. He picked up his pen. Then let's make sure the documents are impossible to misunderstand. 3 days later, the certified letter arrived at Ryan's office. I know exactly when he opened it because my phone started ringing 22 minutes later. The first call went to voicemail. "Dad, what is this?" "Call me." The second came 5 minutes after that. "This has to be some mistake." The third sounded irritated. "You need to explain what's going on." The fourth sounded angry. "Answer your phone." I let all 4 go. Not because I wanted to play games. Because I knew neither of us was ready to have that conversation while emotions were still driving the car. The 5th call came just after lunch. I answered. "Hello, Dad." His voice was tight. "What are you doing?" "I'm eating soup." "You know what I mean." I assumed I did. "This lease." "Yes." "You're seriously doing this?" "I am." Silence. "Then, this is because Melissa got upset over that stupid mug." I closed my eyes.
No.
"Oh, come on." "No, Ryan. It happened 3 days ago. I know when Christmas was. So don't pretend this isn't retaliation." I stood and walked toward the living room window. Outside, my neighbor was shoveling snow off his driveway. "I've changed the business arrangement. You've punished your family." I offered a lease. "You gave me the company. I gave you the company. So the property goes with it." I spoke slowly. "Have you ever looked at the deed?" "Nothing." "Ryan."
No.
"Have you read the occupancy agreement?" Another pause. "I signed whatever you and Marjorie put in front of me." "I know. You handled that stuff." "I handled it because you asked me to. You never said it mattered." I almost laughed. Instead, I said quietly, "That's exactly the problem." He hung up. The next morning, my phone began buzzing again. Not from Ryan. From relatives. First, my Aunt Linda. "Thomas, what's going on?" "It's complicated. It doesn't have to be." She sighed dramatically. "He's your son." I know. Don't destroy his business over Christmas. I'm not. You know that's not what people are saying. That sentence stayed with me.
People.
Apparently, there were already people discussing my life. By lunchtime, my older brother Robert called. You got a minute? For you? Always. He hesitated. Ryan says you're trying to force him out. I'm offering him a lease. Is that really necessary? I think it is. You've always said the business would stay in the family. It still will. Then why now? I looked around my quiet kitchen. Because my son told me to leave his house? Because my daughter-in-law wiped a coffee mug like I carried a disease? Because I was tired? None of those answers felt complete. Finally, I said, because I waited too long. Robert didn't understand. Neither did I. Not completely. That afternoon, I went to the grocery store. Nothing unusual. Milk, bread, coffee. While trying to open a freezer door, pain shot through my fingers. Arthritis. Cold weather always made it worse. A younger man reached past me. Need a hand? I smiled. I've got it. Driving home, I caught myself wondering something I'd never asked before. Did Ryan see moments like that? Did every time I rub my hands or ask someone to repeat themselves become proof that I was fading? The thought bothered me enough that I scheduled a physical with my doctor. Not because I thought anything was seriously wrong. Because I suddenly needed someone objective to tell me I wasn't imagining my own life. The appointment lasted less than an hour. Blood pressure needed work. Arthritis was about what you'd expect for 68. Hearing hadn't changed much. Memory tests were normal. My doctor smiled while putting away her clipboard. Tom, you're doing better than a lot of men 10 years younger. I laughed. So, I'm officially stubborn instead of senile?
She grinned.
Professionally speaking, yes. I walked out feeling lighter than I had in weeks. That evening, my tablet chimed. Incoming video call. Evan. I answered immediately. Hey, buddy. His face filled the screen. Behind him, I could hear someone vacuuming. You okay, Grandpa? I'm all right. You haven't come over. I know. Dad says everybody's busy. I smiled gently. Adults sometimes need to figure things out. He frowned. Are you mad at Dad? I chose my next words carefully. I'm disappointed. Is that different? It is.
How?
I thought about that for a second. When you're angry, you stop listening. And disappointed? You still hope things can get better. He nodded slowly. I miss you. I miss you too. Before hanging up, he held the tablet lower. I built the train. I can't wait to see it. So, you'll come? I hope so. After the call ended, I sat there staring at the blank screen for almost 10 minutes. Then I walked into my office, opened my laptop, and drafted an email to David. Let's cancel everything. Maybe Robert was right. Maybe family mattered more than paperwork. Maybe swallowing my pride was simply part of getting older. My finger hovered over the send button. The phone rang.
Marjorie.
I was hoping to catch you. Good timing. I doubt it. Her voice sounded unusually serious. The bank contacted Ryan today. What happened? They requested documentation proving the warehouse belongs to Bennett Commercial Flooring. I felt my stomach tighten. And he can't produce it. I leaned back slowly. The expansion loan? Paused. She took a breath. There's something else. What? He listed the warehouse as a company-owned, debt-free asset. I closed my eyes. Marjorie. I don't think he intentionally lied.
No.
I think he's repeated it so often that he believes it's true. I deleted the draft email without saying a word. Another thought crossed her mind. She continued. And now he's blaming me. For what? For not giving the bank the paperwork they wanted. I couldn't help it. A short laugh escaped before I could stop it. What? She laughed too. I forwarded myself 3 years' worth of emails. And you asked me once why I keep records. I remember. Listen to this. Paper rustled. She cleared her throat dramatically. Ryan, please review the occupancy agreement before Friday.
Pause. Handle it.
Another page. Ryan, the lender may request updated property information. Dad knows what I want. She flipped again. Need your signature on the revised agreement. She added, can we discuss this after golf season? I laughed harder this time. She wasn't finished. The best one? There's a better one? I emailed him a 9-page legal document. And he replied with a thumbs-up emoji. We both laughed until we couldn't breathe. It wasn't cruel. It was relief. The first genuine laugh I'd had since Christmas Eve. Then she became serious again. Tom? Yes. This stopped being a family disagreement the moment your property was used to make the company appear stronger. I understand. You needed to hear that. I did. That night around 9:30, Ryan called again. His voice sounded completely different.
No anger.
No confidence.
Just fear.
Dad? I'm here. The bank says they need your signature by Friday. What signature? Confirmation that the warehouse belongs to Bennett Commercial Flooring. I looked at the original deed lying on my desk, then out the window into the darkness. But it doesn't. The silence that followed lasted so long, I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, I heard Ryan breathe. For the first time in years, I think my son realized he had built part of his future on something he had never actually owned. The morning after Ryan's call, I was halfway through feeding the birds in my backyard when I heard tires crunch across the frozen driveway. I didn't have to look. I already knew who it was. Ryan climbed out of his SUV first. Melissa followed a few seconds later, carrying a leather folder against her chest. Neither of them smiled. I brushed the birdseed off my gloves and opened the front door before they reached the porch. Morning. Ryan forced a polite nod. Can we come in? Of course. The three of us settled around my kitchen table. The same table where Elaine and I had balanced invoices 40 years earlier. Funny how furniture outlives arguments. Melissa laid the folder in front of me. Our consultant prepared something. I didn't touch it. Ryan leaned forward. Dad, this doesn't have to become a huge deal. I'm listening. The bank just needs clarification. Melissa immediately added, nobody's asking you to give anything away. Her voice was smooth, practiced. This is only paperwork, so everything reflects how the business has always operated. I looked at her. Always operated? She smiled politely. You know what I mean. No, I don't. Ryan sighed. The lender wants consistency.
So do I.
Melissa slid the folder closer. If you'll just read it. I put on my glasses and opened the document. The title sounded harmless enough. Property Ownership Clarification. The first page wasn't especially alarming. Neither was the second. The third page changed everything. There it was, buried beneath paragraphs of legal language. A clause authorizing the property to serve as collateral for commercial financing connected to Bennett Commercial Flooring. I read it twice, then a third time. Finally, I closed the folder. This isn't a clarification. Ryan shifted in his chair. It basically is.
No.
I tapped the page. This allows my warehouse to secure your expansion loan. Melissa folded her arms. The consultant said that's standard. I'm sure he did. Ryan spoke carefully. The Cincinnati project is solid. Maybe. We've already lined up contracts.
Good.
So? He spread his hands. What's the problem? I looked at him for several seconds. If the expansion fails? It won't. If it fails? He didn't answer. The lender could pursue the collateral. Melissa jumped in, clearing her throat. It isn't going to fail. I hope you're right. So sign it.
No.
Silence settled over the kitchen. Ryan stared at me. You don't trust me. I trust you to work hard. That's not the same thing.
No.
It isn't. Melissa's patience disappeared. Thomas. I prefer Tom. She ignored that. You're 68. I waited. What exactly are you planning to do with the warehouse? There it was. Not anger. Not frustration. Assumption. The assumption that my remaining years automatically reduce my ownership. That anything I still possessed was simply waiting to become theirs. I stood. Wait here. I walked into my office and returned carrying a gray metal file box. The same one Elaine insisted we keep. I placed it gently on the table. Ryan frowned. What's that?
History.
I unlocked the latch. One by one, I removed documents. The original property deed. the transfer agreement, the occupancy contract, insurance statements, tax receipts, roof replacement invoices, parking lot repair bills. Finally, I placed a stack of printed emails beside them. Ryan stared. I've seen some of those.
I know.
You kept all this? I keep everything. I handed him the deed. Read the owner's name. He looked down. His expression changed almost immediately. It says Bennett Property Holdings.
Yes. You? Yes.
He flipped another page, then another. This. He frowned harder. I don't remember any of this. Marjorie's yellow sticky note was still attached to one document. Reminder sent again. I slid several emails toward him. You don't remember because you never read them. He cleared his throat and picked up the first one, then another, then another. Each contained the same basic request. Please review attached occupancy agreement. His replies were painfully short.
Handle it.
Dad knows. Later, he rubbed the back of his neck. I trusted you. I nodded.
I know.
So, why are we sitting here like strangers? Because trust isn't the same thing as ownership. Melissa shook her head. This feels like a trap. I looked at her. These papers were signed before you married Ryan. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Ryan quietly asked, so you've been paying? He flipped through invoices. Property taxes? Yes. He turned another page. The roof? Yes. Insurance? Yes. The parking lot?
Yes.
He looked genuinely confused. I thought the company covered all that. The company covered utilities and maintenance. Small maintenance. His face slowly lost color. I know. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, Melissa broke the silence. We've already invested in Cincinnati. I looked at her. What do you mean? She glanced toward Ryan before answering. We've paid consultants, deposits, marketing, equipment reservations. None of it's refundable. Ryan added quietly, we were expecting the financing to cover everything. I leaned back. For the first time since Christmas Eve, I felt something other than disappointment. I felt worry. Not for Ryan alone. For his employees. For installers with mortgages. Warehouse workers with families. Office staff who depended on regular paychecks. I wasn't interested in teaching my son a lesson if innocent people paid the price. After they left, I called David immediately. He answered on the first ring. How'd it go? They wanted me to pledge the warehouse. I expected that. They've already committed money. I suspected that too. I rubbed my forehead. What if I'm hurting people who had nothing to do with Christmas? David didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked, how healthy is the existing business? I don't know. Ask Marjorie.
So I did.
She called me back an hour later. The Columbus operation is profitable. What about payroll?
Fine.
Employees? Secure. The expansion? She sighed. Too fast.
Meaning?
Ryan wanted Cincinnati before the business was ready. He never mentioned that. He probably believed he could grow into it. So, if the expansion doesn't happen, the company survives. No layoffs? None. I felt my shoulders relax for the first time all day. The problem wasn't my decision. The trouble had started long before Christmas. My boundary had simply pulled back the curtain and let the light in. That evening, another email arrived. This one from Ryan. He'd copied Robert, my aunt, 2 cousins, even Melissa's parents. The subject line read, concern about Dad. I opened it. According to Ryan, grief had changed me. I was acting irrationally, emotionally, making financial decisions based on hurt feelings. Then came the sentence that stopped me cold. We're worried he may no longer be able to manage complex business matters without assistance. I read it again. Then again. I wasn't angry. I was stunned. He wasn't just disagreeing with me. He was using my age to question whether I was still competent. I called David immediately. You've read it? It just came through. Now what? We protect you.
How?
We document everything. The next morning we met. He recommended updating several estate documents. Nothing dramatic. Just practical. Independent legal oversight for property matters. Clear financial summaries. Everything organized. Everything documented. If anyone questioned my judgment, the paperwork would answer for me. 2 days later, Ryan called again. This time, I didn't answer. Not because I was avoiding him, because I had nothing left to explain. Then something unexpected happened. Saturday afternoon, I found an envelope tucked inside my mailbox. No stamp, no address. Inside was a folded sheet of notebook paper, written in 12-year-old handwriting. Asterisk Grandpa, I don't think your hands are dirty. Love, Evan, asterisk. That was all. One sentence. 7 words. I sat in my truck holding that note for nearly 15 minutes. Melissa's voice echoed in my memory. Don't ever put your filthy hands on my things again. Then Evans, I don't think your hands are dirty. Children have a remarkable way of seeing what's actually happening. They don't notice legal documents or financing or family politics. They notice whether someone is kind. That evening, Robert called. Ryan and Melissa are hosting everyone on New Year's Day. I heard. They want to settle this. I smiled quietly.
No.
What? They want witnesses. Robert didn't answer. They think the truth will embarrass me. I looked at the neatly organized folder sitting on my desk. Property records, emails, tax receipts, the deed. Every page in perfect order. I'll be there. You sure? Very. After we hung up, David called to go over the plan. You don't have to expose your son. I know. You don't have to humiliate him. I don't want to. So, why are you going? I closed the folder. Because after years of staying quiet, I finally understood something. The truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs to be organized. I paused. I think, I said calmly, Ryan invited the family because he believes the facts are on his side. I picked up the folder and placed it beside the front door. I'm simply bringing the facts he forgot to read. New Year's Day arrived gray and bitterly cold. The kind of Ohio morning where the wind found every gap in your coat, no matter how carefully you zipped it. Robert lived in Dublin, about 20 minutes from my house. I pulled into his driveway just before 1 o'clock with the same gray folder resting on the passenger seat. I sat there for a moment before getting out. Not because I was nervous about the paperwork, because I still hoped, right up until I opened that car door, that my son would meet me outside and say, Dad, let's just talk. He didn't. Inside, the smell of roast beef and fresh rolls filled the house. Several relatives were already there. Robert and his wife. My Aunt Carol. 2 cousins. Melissa's parents. Marjorie sat quietly near the fireplace with a legal pad on her lap. David arrived a minute after I did. Ryan frowned the second he saw him. You brought your lawyer? I smiled politely. You invited everyone to discuss my property. I nodded toward Marjorie. I brought the 2 people who actually know something about it. Nobody laughed. The tension was too thick. Robert finally cleared his throat. Let's sit down. We gathered around the large dining room table. It reminded me of family dinners years earlier. Except nobody reached for the food. Ryan spoke first. He'd obviously rehearsed what he wanted to say. I don't want this to become uglier than it already has. Neither did I. He continued. My dad's been through a lot since Mom passed. Several relatives nodded sympathetically. I know grief changes people. I stayed quiet. He retired. He stepped away from the company. And lately he hesitated, just long enough. He's made decisions that don't really make sense. Melissa gently placed her hand on his arm. We're worried. I almost admired how convincing she sounded. Ryan looked around the room. He transferred the business to me years ago. Everybody knows that. Heads nodded again. Now he's threatening the company because of something that happened at Christmas. He looked directly at me over a coffee mug. The room fell silent. Robert finally turned toward me. Tom? I folded my hands together. May I ask a couple of questions first? Robert nodded. Go ahead. I looked at Melissa. Did I pick up your coffee mug? She hesitated. Yes. Did I apologize? Another pause. Yes. Did I argue? No. I turned toward Ryan. What did you say after I apologize? He looked away. Robert spoke quietly. He asked you a question. Ryan sighed. I told him, his voice dropped. To leave. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Aunt Carol slowly lowered her coffee cup. I continued calmly. I didn't leave because of a mug. I left because my son told me to leave his home. The room felt different now. Not solved. Just more honest. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. Dad. I raised one hand. I'm not finished. I opened the gray folder. Instead of dumping hundreds of pages across the table, I passed everyone a single sheet. One page. Simple columns. Easy to read. At the top it said, property support provided by Thomas Bennett. Below that were yearly totals. Property taxes. Insurance. Roof replacement. Parking lot resurfacing. Drainage improvements. Security upgrades. Structural repairs. Finally, one line near the bottom. Estimated market rent forgiven over 7 years. Nobody said anything for several seconds. Robert adjusted his glasses. You paid all this? Yes. He looked at Ryan. You knew? Ryan stared at the paper. He swallowed. I knew Dad handled property expenses. No, Marjorie quietly interrupted. You assumed. She slid another packet across the table. Printed emails. Only 6 pages. Enough to establish a pattern. Ryan picked up the first one. His face tightened. Then the second. Then the third. Robert reached across the table. May I? Ryan handed them over. Robert read silently before suddenly chuckling. Gee, can you handle the boring property stuff? He looked up. You actually wrote that? Ryan rubbed his forehead. I don't even remember. Marjorie couldn't resist. I do. A few people smiled despite themselves. She continued. My personal favorite was the thumbs-up emoji you sent after I emailed a 9-page legal agreement. Even Aunt Carol laughed softly. Ryan didn't. He looked embarrassed. For the first time all afternoon, he wasn't angry. He was uncomfortable. There's a difference. Melissa straightened in her chair. Ryan believed the property was part of the business. I looked at her. Did you? She hesitated. Yes. Why? Because that's what Ryan told me. I nodded. So, neither of you ever checked. She didn't answer. David finally spoke. His voice was calm, almost clinical. For clarity. He slid copies of the deed onto the table. The warehouse has always been owned by Bennett Property Holdings. He tapped another document. The occupancy agreement specifically states the operating company has usage rights. Another page. It also clearly prohibits using the property as collateral without Mr. Bennett's written consent. Silence. Ryan stared at his own signature. I signed this. 7 years ago, David answered. I never read. I know. The words came out of my mouth before I could stop them. I realized I'd spoken. Ryan looked at me. I trusted you. I know. I figured you'd always. He stopped. I finished the sentence for him. Take care of it. He nodded. Yes. I leaned forward. And that's exactly what I've been doing. No anger. No sarcasm. Just truth. I took care of taxes, insurance, repairs, the roof, the parking lot. I kept solving problems before they ever reached your desk. I paused. My mistake was never asking you to notice. Melissa crossed her arms. You encouraged that. She wasn't entirely wrong. I nodded slowly. I did. Everyone looked surprised. I thought protecting my son made me a good father. I smiled sadly. Instead, I made responsibility invisible. The room stayed quiet. Even David looked at me for a moment before looking back down at his notes. Robert folded the summary sheet. So, what exactly are you asking for now? David answered before I could. Nothing extraordinary. He handed everyone another document. 90-day transition. Commercial lease. 10% below current market rent. No back rent. No penalties. No personal guarantees. Future purchase option after 2 successful years. Independent appraisal. Standard maintenance responsibilities. Robert read every page. Finally, he looked at Ryan. I've rented warehouse space before. He tapped the paper. This is generous. Ryan didn't respond. Instead, he kept staring at the summary Marjorie had prepared. His lips moved silently as he added numbers. Again. Then again. Finally, he whispered, I didn't know. I answered gently.
No.
You didn't. Because knowing would have required asking. His shoulders slumped. Melissa reached for his hand. He quietly pulled it away. That surprised everyone, including her.
She started to speak.
This isn't. Ryan interrupted.
No.
She looked at him. Ryan. He shook his head. He isn't lying. Those 4 words changed the room. Not because everything was suddenly fixed. Because for the first time all afternoon, my son stopped defending a story he knew wasn't true. Robert slowly exhaled. I owe you an apology, Tom. You don't. I judged you before asking questions. He stood, walked around the table, and squeezed my shoulder. I'm sorry. So am I. Aunt Carol quietly wiped her eyes. I thought. She looked embarrassed. I believed the Facebook post. Melissa stared at the table. Nobody said anything cruel to her. Nobody needed to. The truth had already done its work. I looked directly at Ryan. You have 3 choices. He met my eyes. Sign the lease. Move the business within 90 days. Or purchase the property after an independent appraisal once you qualify. I paused. I won't pledge it as collateral. He swallowed. You really think I can build this on my own? I think you'll finally know what it costs. Before he could answer, Robert's wife walked into the dining room holding her cell phone. Melissa. Everyone turned. Sophie's asking if you've seen your special red Christmas mug. Melissa blinked.
What?
The one with the gold snowflake. She frowned.
No.
I thought it was at home. Robert's wife looked apologetic.
Oh.
I found a box of holiday mugs in my basement yesterday. Melissa's face slowly changed. You didn't. I donated them to the church thrift store this morning. Silence. Complete silence. Then Marjorie coughed into her napkin. I knew exactly why. She was trying very hard not to laugh. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The object that had started the entire disaster was probably sitting on a thrift store shelf somewhere with a 75-cent price sticker. Nobody made fun of Melissa. I certainly didn't. I simply smiled gently. I hope someone enjoys their coffee. Even Ryan let out the smallest tired laugh. The meeting ended without shouting, without slammed doors, without dramatic speeches. Ryan didn't sign the lease.
Not that day.
He quietly gathered his papers and left with Melissa. 3 days later, while I was replacing a light bulb in the garage, my phone rang. Voicemail.
Ryan.
His voice sounded exhausted. Dad. Long pause. I'm not calling about the lease. Another pause. I need to tell you something. What happened after Mom got sick isn't the whole story. I think you deserve to know why I started believing the company was already mine. The message ended there. I stood alone in the garage listening to it twice. Maybe paperwork had settled the business. But families were always more complicated than contracts. Ryan called again the next morning. This time I answered.
Morning.
Can we meet? His voice didn't sound defensive anymore. It sounded tired. Where? Sunny Street Cafe 8? I knew the place. Small family restaurant just outside Worthington. Good coffee, honest food. The kind of place where retirees gathered every weekday morning to solve the world's problems over scrambled eggs. I'll be there. When I walked in the next morning, Ryan was already sitting in a booth. He looked older than 40. Not physically, just worn down. There was a cup of coffee in front of him he hadn't touched. Morning, Dad. Morning. The waitress poured fresh coffee for me. Neither of us spoke until she walked away. Finally, Ryan looked out the window. I've been thinking about Mom. So have I. He smiled sadly. I guess I never stopped. I waited. When she got sick, he rubbed both hands together. Everything happened so fast. I nodded. I remember. You were at the hospital every day.
Yes.
You stopped coming into the office. I had to. I know that now. He stared into his coffee. But back then, I thought you'd left me to figure everything out. That surprised me. I never wanted you to feel that way. I didn't tell you.
No.
I was terrified. He laughed once without humor. I was 33. I suddenly had employees asking me questions. Customers. Payroll. Mom was dying. And every night I'd come home wondering if I'd made another mistake. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not guilt. Sadness. He continued quietly. When you transferred the business, I thought you were telling me it's yours now. I was. But in my head, that became everything. He finally looked at me. I convinced myself the warehouse was already mine, because it felt easier than admitting I didn't actually know. I nodded slowly. I can understand that. I kept repeating it to myself, to Melissa, to the bank. Eventually, I believed it. Neither of us spoke for a while. The waitress refilled our coffee. Outside, snow from Christmas had begun melting into dirty piles along the curb. Ryan took a deep breath. I owe you more than an apology. I stayed quiet. I chose Melissa over you. He swallowed hard. When she embarrassed you, I should have stopped it. You had already apologized. I knew that. He looked ashamed. I was worried about what people in the room would think. I couldn't help asking, and what did they think after you threw your father out? He closed his eyes briefly. I've asked myself that every day. Another silence. Then he said the words I'd been waiting to hear. I treated you like your only value was what you could eventually leave me. His voice cracked. I'm sorry. No excuses. No explanations. Just 4 simple words. I believed he meant them. But believing someone is sorry isn't the same thing as pretending nothing happened. I appreciate hearing that. He nodded. I know. I forgive you. His eyes lifted immediately. But forgiveness isn't the same thing as going backward. The hope on his face softened into understanding. I figured. I believe you're sorry today. I took a sip of coffee. What matters to me is who you are next month. And 6 months from now. And next Christmas. He slowly nodded. That's fair.
Yeah.
Business came next. Not because it mattered more than family, because avoiding it had caused enough problems already. Ryan slid a signed lease across the table. I had David review it again. I looked through every page. Nothing had changed. 3-year lease. Below market rent. Automatic electronic payments. Quarterly maintenance reports. No using the property as collateral. Purchase option after 2 years if he qualified through normal financing.
He watched me sign.
I canceled Cincinnati. I looked up. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't. We lost money. Consulting fees. Deposits. A little pride. He managed a tired smile. But the Columbus location was doing fine. He said, I should have focused on protecting that instead of trying to impress everyone. He folded the lease copy in his hands. I think your mother would have agreed. For the first time that morning, he smiled. I think she would have, too. About 3 weeks later, Marjorie called. You're gonna appreciate this. What happened? Your son paid the rent. I figured he would. 3 days early. He laughed. Miracles happen. She wasn't done. He also asked 3 questions before signing the maintenance report. Only 3. Don't get carried away. They both laughed. Then she added, I think he's finally reading things. That alone is worth celebrating. He cleared his throat. Then, a month later, Melissa surprised him. She showed up alone. No Ryan. No kids. Just her. She stood on his porch holding a small paper bag from the same bakery where he'd bought cinnamon rolls that Christmas. I won't stay long. He invited her inside. She looked nervous. I've practiced this speech. I can tell. She laughed awkwardly. I owe you an apology. He waited. What I said about your hands, she looked down. It was cruel. I was embarrassed. I wanted everything perfect. When you picked up that mug, I reacted like appearances mattered more than people. She took a slow breath. And suggesting you couldn't manage your own affairs, she shook her head. I knew better. I just wanted Ryan to win. He appreciated her honesty. Not because it erased the past, but because she wasn't hiding behind excuses. I accept your apology. She looked relieved. But I need one promise. Anything. He smiled gently. Don't ever teach Evan or Sophie that getting older makes someone less valuable. Tears filled her eyes. I won't. Their relationship didn't magically become close after that. They were polite, careful, respectful. Sometimes that's enough. Spring arrived earlier than usual. One Saturday morning, Evan came with him to the warehouse. He showed him how to measure flooring, how to calculate square footage, how different materials cost different amounts. Evan asked more questions in 2 hours than Ryan had asked during his last 5 years working beside him. He smiled the whole drive home. A week later, Sophie handed him a wrapped package. Inside was a blue ceramic mug. Big white letters covered one side. Grandpa's cup. Underneath, in smaller letters, please don't mix it up. He laughed harder than he had in years. I think this one's safe. She grinned proudly. It only belongs to you. Every morning since then, he drinks his coffee from that mug. Not because it's expensive. It probably cost $12, maybe $15. He uses it because an 8-year-old girl understood something the adults had forgotten. Respect is never about the object. It's about the person holding it. Getting older isn't easy. People notice your slower steps before they remember your stronger years. Your hands ache. Your hearing fades. Friends disappear one funeral at a time. Children become busy raising families of their own. Sometimes the help you've quietly given for decades becomes so ordinary that nobody remembers it came from you in the first place. He made mistakes, too. He thought love meant removing every obstacle from his son's path. Instead, he removed too many opportunities for gratitude. Real love doesn't erase consequences. Sometimes it requires enough courage to step aside and let another person carry the weight of their own choices. The warehouse still belongs to him. The business belongs to Ryan. These days they talk more honestly than they ever did when everything looked perfect from the outside. They aren't closer because they ignored what happened. They're closer because they finally stopped pretending. And every Christmas now, when he pours coffee into his blue mug, he remembers something far more valuable than a building, a business, or an inheritance. The greatest gift a parent can leave a child isn't unlimited support. It's the character to appreciate it while it's still being freely given. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with someone you loved? If so, I'd love to hear what you learned from that experience. Thank you for spending this time with me. And I hope this story reminds you that kindness and self-respect can exist side by side.